failure can be a teaching experience too. I failed enough to know. And somewhere in between there is a story you're going to be able to tell a member of the media like us, right? Like, you know, what am I trying to do? What do I want the player to get out of it? You know, if it works, then XYZ thing. If it doesn't work, ABC thing.
I would say email me, and I will maybe write about your. No, I mean you can, but really the thing is to email, like reach out. It's weird because seemingly when I go to events, I run into a lot of developers who just don't they don't want to. I don't know. It's not that they don't want to make the first step. I don't think they understand that it's that easy. Like you can just literally send an email to anybody, any journalist, anybody on this panel, especially him, and he'll respond to you within an hour. No, but no, seriously, it's our job. I always found it perplexing. I don't mean to pick on them, but I don't know if it's still like this. But IGN, back way before I worked at Kotaku, I occasionally would go there. And there was no way to find the email addresses for any of the writers. And I always used to think, what the hell's that about? Like, our job as journalists is to be approachable so we can tell stories. The idea that you would bury your contact information is so bizarre. And I know there are a lot of people, I mean, I've been on panels like this where other journalists are like, well, don't email me, or if you email me, make sure it's only about this one thing. That's bullshit. I mean, our job is to cover video games and to cover developers. It doesn't mean we're going to cover everybody who emails us, but it's absurd to think that we shouldn't at least engage in that initial conversation. And I think that most journalists, at least in my mind, the good journalists, would always be welcome or open to the idea that you send out that initial email. So don't be put off by the idea that you that so caught up in the idea that you have to do all these other things before you send out an email. Also, don't send an email and say, in 2 years I'm going to start working on this game. So have a story. But once you have a story, just send out an email and say, look, I'm working on this thing, and I want to see if you'd be interested in writing about it. It's pretty easy, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to build on that and say, also start laying the groundwork. Don't email people when your Kickstarter page goes live. God, no. Because, I mean, one, we see a lot of that, but I think you need to start building the relationships. You can even build the relationship and be like, hey, can I ask your opinion about something? Just like, we're people, you're people, let's act like people and have a discussion.
One practical thing, press kit is a really useful tool. If you don't know what that is, just look it up. It's very helpful. I guess the other thing for me is have a good origin story. I think part of the problem that people run into is that they're often pitching things after a game's already been created, and they either have been documenting or strategizing from the beginning what their origin story is going to be. So let me give you a good example. And this is just like, this is what I feel like, sort of I like, or the sorts of things that Kill Screen goes for. How many of you played Journey before? You guys played Journey before? It's like this game you play as like a sort of Bedouin-style traveler. It's not an open world, it sort of feels like it, but it takes place on these like sandy dunes, and the developer of that game company, their CEO, this guy Genova Chen, who, by the way, if you're very interested in like how to talk to the press, like read everything that guy has done. He knows how to like cast a vision for what it is that he's working on. But he tells a story about so what's because you're going to get this question all the time. It's like, so what's the origin story for this game? Or like, oh, how did you come up with the idea for the game? And if your origin story is, well, I was playing some other game and I thought it would be cool to add zombies to it. Like, that's not going to be a very compelling. There's probably going to be something wrong with that game to begin with, right? Like, I just feel like you're not going to go down the path of an interesting game. But if you're someone like Genova Chen, he says, well, I was driving through. He always said, I guess all his games come from driving. He's like, they were driving from. Or this isn't quite an origin story, but this was like a development story that they told. They were driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and they stopped in these dunes. And he has engineers like get out of their car and then run their fingers through grains of sand. And he said, make a game that feels like that, right? As a journalist, you're like, oh, well, there you go. There's the lead right there, right? Now, a lot of this has to do with the fact that like he's an incredibly creative person, and that's part of his process. But you look at creatives in like any other industry, and the ones who are able to cast a good story about their process. I was traveling from point A to point B, or George Lucas's stories about driving through the San Francisco mist and seeing the giant like steam ships, and those are what you call the things that take shit, the giant cranes that take packages off of ships, and those being the inspiration for the AT-ATs. Like, those are the sorts of things that, like, those cast a vision for other people, because you have to speak to people through metaphor. And the easier that you can make that job for people who are writing about your game, the easier it's going to be for them to relay that to other people, and then they've done a lot of the work for you. If you don't have that story, if you don't have that vision, you can't talk about your game in that way. How are you going to expect a journalist to be able to find that story, especially for folks who are as busy as we are? So again, it's like if you have a really good, another good example, that dragon cancer, right? Now, there's a tragic story there. It's about a father who's lost his son, right? But that just has like a natural sort of resonance to it. So if you're not thinking about that stuff, like if what inspires you to make games is not a story that anyone wants to hear, then it's not going to be something I'm going to be interested in writing about.
All right, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Before we head out, I just wanted to quickly thank our sponsors, Microsoft, Qualcomm, Millennial Media, Autodesk, and the law offices of Chris Reed. Also our partners in this event, Games for Change, check them out. And also our social media partners, the guys at Goodnight Games. All right, thank you guys so much for coming. Hope to see you soon.